I love you. God bless you. This is Minister George Bowden, and I wanted to take an opportunity just to say thank you to all of our subscribers who are subscribed to our new YouTube channel. All right, grace and peace to everybody. On tonight, we come to you via our virtual land, and we're honored this evening, or whenever you may view this broadcast, with a very humble man we met on Twitter some time ago, and we have connected. We have been able to talk a few times about some different things, and he is. Took this opportunity to be our guest on tonight, and he will be talking about education. Somebody had asked me and said, "You're a preacher. Why are you talking about education?" Well, as we all know, you need both. So, Mr. Stubbs will talk about his role in the Dallas, Texas um, field as a managing director. So I am just going to ask him some questions regarding his career. This man, he is a man of God who is saved, and he's going to tell us a little bit about himself, and then we'll go into our interview on tonight. So thank you for watching. We ask that you please subscribe to our YouTube channel, and let's just stay connected as we build the kingdom for such a time as this. All right, my brother.
All right. Well. Thanks first for the opportunity. I think this is season 1 for you. 2.
No. We've been going. Somebody told me yesterday we've been going strong for 2 years now. I didn't
Okay.
realize it.
Okay.
So yeah,
So I guess that makes it season 2 if you go on an annual rotation. So
yes.
glad to be on the invitee list. And just want to applaud you with the work that we definitely have seen. And as of late, there's opportunity to spread the good news in multiple platforms and taking the good news to the highways, the hedges, the byways, but also in the airspace. So I applaud you with that effort. So I think one of your first questions you wanted me to be able to respond to was around just telling you a little bit about myself and what inspired me to go into education. And I thought around just sharing my experience. So I grew up in a single parent household, and not sharing that for pity or to even think around like things I didn't have, because oftentimes when we talk around single households and that experience, we're trying to shine light on absences and gaps and deficits and things of that nature. But my mom made sure I had what I needed. And so she was very adamant about the role that salvation and education should play in my life. She modeled that. And so um, grew up in Rochester, New York. I'm here in Dallas now, but I am an Eskimo. So grew up there, and just been really blessed to be surrounded by positive, healthy male role models. And I believe my mother was very intentional in allowing me to have those opportunities. So while I grew up in a single parent household, I did have access to my father during the summer, and then I also had access to uncles and cousins, and then locally was a part of the youth department and a part of just music department and ministry. So I had access to a generation older than me who were on fire for Christ. And so I look back at my church experience, and I'm just I realized how much I already had and had access to. And so just hearing testimonies on Sunday night, and then watching people grow in the faith, go from brother to minister, or brother to deacon, or just brother to being involved in the community. And so I had good examples. And so I appreciate that. And left in 97 when I graduated from high school and went to North Carolina. I was there from 97 up until 2015. And so got rooted and grounded in Rochester, and was able to go off to college. And I think oftentimes, I don't know if this was your experience, but oftentimes the thought was, that we could not um, be saved and go off to college, or go too far off. And so I was able to really apply the foundation that I had, and knowledge that I had, and be able to use that when off in college. And so I was able to start a men's ministry while in college, and student body president, and just got really involved in leadership roles growing up, even to present. And I think that has helped me to fine tune skills and interest and impact. And I've been really blessed to apply in the secular world both skills and in the religious sector or in church. And so um, that has been a good experience for me. So I think just knowing ever since I was young that I was going to go into education and be a teacher, and I have educators in my family, and um, so and I knew my gift was teaching, and so there was no separating of the two. And so I
That's
just
good.
appreciate how I've been able to exercise in the secular world specific things that have been able to carry over, even when I was Sunday school superintendent, be able to carry over some of those learnings
Hmm.
to dive in deeper into the Word of God, and with the intent to develop um, youth who had appreciation for their walk for Christ and the Word.
That's good. I want to interject on something that you said about having, even though you grew up in a single parent household, like you said, you don't say it for pity. You don't say it for almost like, oh, we feel bad for you. But how important was it for you to be around healthy men, your uncles, the elders, the pastors? How important was that for you to be around them and enabling you to be the man that you are today?
Yeah, I think it was extremely helpful. I think,
Hmm.
I was armed with puzzle pieces growing
Good.
up. And
Hmm.
then when you become a young adult, you begin to put the pieces on some surface to try to make sense of, like, what does this picture look like?
Sure, sure.
And then, now as as a full adult, well into my 40s, and you begin to think, like, where am I in life, and who am I as a father, as a husband, as, like, who am
Hmm.
I now in ministry? The puzzle pieces begin to fit in even more. And so
Right.
I appreciate that, and I would say that any mother or woman who has to raise children, especially a male child, without help, it's important that that child is that young man is given the opportunity to have access to healthy, and high emphasis on healthy, like
Right.
healthy role models. Um, and I've had a sampling of role models who've been in the church, who've been in professional arena, and so being able to take lessons from all to try to figure out, what do I want to do that's like them, or what do I not want to do, and then how do I see myself? And I think that's just very important for a young man growing up. And I say even now, I've been on the circuit speaking about the role of mentorship, and I think, just my single parent experience caused me to lean into mentorship relationships differently, and I've been able to use that to my benefit in education. But as of late, as I've talked about mentoring, I had to reach out to a gentleman who I really looked up to in education and say, hey, I taught this mentor stuff, but I don't have
Sure.
a mentor that I actually name as mentor.
I see.
And so we began to cultivate a relationship where I'm able to really sit at the tutelage of someone who is where I would like to be in the next 10 to 15 years.
That's good because I think in some retrospect, we all need a mentor, because we don't know it all. And I think it's important for you, like you said, to cultivate that relationship. Pick up the phone and say, hey, I know you've been here before. What should I do? How should I navigate through this situation or problem, and then be able to discuss it and figure it out? So I think that's very important. So, with you being an educator, you being a black male who is an educator, what are some of the things that you have come up against with being in the education system that you have navigated through to be where you are today?
Yeah, so I started out in rural North Carolina, and that experience really seasoned my impression on education,
Hmm.
and being able to, I grew up in an urban area, and so I had access things I probably shouldn't have had access to, but there's just more access in an urban setting. So getting a chance to see what was not available in a rural setting was very helpful. And then from there, I went from a traditional district to a charter school district, and still in the same area, and saw, still community values was important, and I was aligned with community values there. Felt very accepted and included, and was able to be a guest editorialist for one of the local newspapers. And so I felt the sense of community there. That was important for me. And then I went on to go back to the Raleigh Durham area, and worked in traditional public school district. And so I've gotten a chance to see charter, traditional, and then also private to a certain degree. Just get to see like some of the rigors associated with being an educator in those instances. And the one that really stands out to me is just sometimes the role that Black males are expected to play in this education system. Um, Oftentimes is that of a disciplinarian. And so, you're called to silence a classroom, silence a grade level, silence a building, and so while I appreciated the opportunities to be able to do that, I did feel like I did have an instructional eye, an instructional focus that I wanted to be able to contribute, and a passion um, for education and building leaders. And so I think many Black males attest to the fact that when they're in education, sometimes they get placed in some of the hardest situations, or are expected to be that of a disciplinarian, and not viewed as an intellectual or an academic. Um, and so that's been my experience in some places, but I feel like I've been able to navigate that through presentation, through impact, um, just in my knowledge of strategy and where I want to go as an educator. So I think I've been able to help prove that that we have more to offer. It has worked to my advantage when I was a principal of a school in Charlotte. That was a pretty tough assignment. Took over what was an alternative school. Did not have an alt ed background. Didn't attend an alt ed school growing up. None of my friends were alt ed, and so I had to really apply a different practice, and really get rid of some biases about alt ed to really um, make contributions into that community. And so I think that's the one thing that really stands out in my mind is like, how do you navigate that? And then the other part is, Black males comprise about 2% of the education workforce. And so where we aren't represented, how do we increase that representation? How do we build robust systems to recruit, develop, and retain Black male educators has been, a lot of my interest and impact as of late. And then too, I want to tie that to my growing up in a single parent experience and having to seek out mentorship relationships. I've been able to take that same passion and create opportunities for um, Black male students as well as Black male educators to benefit from mentoring opportunities to meet goals or to develop.
That's good, but why do you think there's a lack of black male teachers? I can count. I think that I had a math teacher in sixth grade that was a black male, and that was it. Why do you think the ratio is so? I mean, so drastically low?
Yeah, I think a lot contributes to it. I mean, when you look at the data around or the research around why many men of color, Black males, don't stay in the profession, it shines light to the salary, the compensation.
Okay,
Oftentimes, we have to be the breadwinners or the providers for the family, and so
right.
when the work and the pay don't seem to be equal, I think you have a hard time, retaining Black males. Also, there's research around, like Black males being able to feel like they are being developed and also in an environment where they are valued,
Hmm.
and they aren't one of few. And so we're able to create these cohort experiences. And then if there are opportunities to augment income or show how to bring in multiple streams of income while still being in the classroom, which I talk to a lot of Black male educators around that. Like, I get it. You want to make more money. You want to pay off those loans. I get all of that.
Right, right.
If you feel like you are really called to be in the classroom, let's explore ways that you can bring in other income outside of your 9 to 5. So I think those are some of the more obvious reasons as to why there's difficulty in recruiting black males to the profession.
That's very interesting because at times I'm just like growing up, I'm like, where are the black male teachers at? We have black women teachers, but very few. We did have some of the teachers' aides, but of course, they were just hired just to yell at us and
Yeah.
tell us to come back into school after lunch. But outside of that, that was it. So my next question to you, when it revolves around COVID, how have you seen education change since the beginning of you going into education to the time in which we're living in with this hybrid schooling with COVID and everything? How have things changed?
Yeah. So I we do know that before COVID, there are a lot of things broken that needed to be repaired. I think that some things that have happened, or things that have truly come to surface, or we shine light on, is the fact that educational inequities exist. And I think COVID just really exposed that in a way that not a lot of people really were either aware or accepted the fact. When you look at students who are in high poverty schools, they really struggled during COVID in comparison to those that are in low poverty schools. And so, number one, we saw, or we're continuing to see, where there are educational inequities within our education system. The other thing that I think has changed, as it relates to going through COVID, is we've had to really reimagine how we think about school and how we embrace teaching and learning. I know some districts have, looked at a different school year calendar. Like, how does that look different from the simplest things of like the school calendar to the school day? There's some schools who have now gone to longer school days, Monday through Thursday, and there's a 3-day weekend. And then, as it's applying to us here within my district here in Texas, how we um, how we make changes to how we respond to the needs and make changes in how we do school as it relates to um, the instructional block. And so we now have to be able to offer opportunities for intervention that's highly targeted. There's some bills that have passed here to support us, and we've had some ESSER funds, and so people are trying to reimagine, or educators are trying to reimagine, like, education experience and how we embrace this. Many have shifted to, or have adopted, more tech tools and tech platforms in order to not only engage students but assess them and be more data driven. And so those two come to mind. The two others I think about are the role that social emotional learning is playing. We saw an increase in depression. We saw an increase in dysregulation, during COVID. Here in the Texas area, I know for sure Fort Worth. I have 3 schools in Fort Worth. There was a lot of child abuse, domestic violence, and so trauma or traumatic experiences have caused our students to return to school, or to enter in schools. You have to consider kindergarten and preschool. Um, Not really with all of the skills and tools that they need, and responding to like this lingering or persistent trauma. And so we've had to become more intentional about what social emotional learning looks like. And many schools have adopted curriculum. Many schools have um, hired or used their funds, federal funds, to create positions that responds to the different needs of students. And so we've had to be more intentional about how we use those funds to address social emotional learning. And then lastly, which I alluded to a little bit, is just the increase in technology. You've seen a lot of things happen virtually now, whether it be staff, professional development, opportunities to engage parents, and then also like direct instruction has shifted in some instances um, to virtual remote type of opportunities. And so those are the takeaways that I've seen and have to respond to as it relates to um, COVID.
That's good. Like you said, mostly everything seems to still be on some type of virtual stance, which is good because you're able to get a lot more things done quicker and easier than sometimes meeting in person. My next question to you would be, you growing up in a single parent household, how important was it for you going into high school, going into college, um, and still maintaining a relationship with God?
Yeah, it was
Because
very.
sometimes, you hear a lot of people when they go off to college, it's time to party, it's time to do whatever you want to do. So, how important was it for you to continue to, build your faith in God?
Yeah, that very important. I have always been involved um, in church, whether it's
Good.
in music ministry, youth department, Bible Bowl. There was always something.
Yes,
There was
bringing back
yeah,
memories.
bring them back. There was always something that kept me involved, and I enjoyed going to church and being connected with
Yes.
my church family, and that
Yeah.
was critical. That's critical for our young people. Um, and then it seemed that there was this pouring into me that happened when at church, and so. Um, this encouragement. I had a very good. I feel like I had a very good relationship with my pastor growing up.
Okay.
Um, I mean, as a kid, it was as normal as it should be,
Right.
speaking from
Right.
afar. But
Sure.
I think when I got of age to, drive and work and do things like that, I do remember episodes of, coming to the church and helping to mow the lawn, or coming to the church early to talk.
Hmm.
Um, and then when I got to college and came back, I remember I needed a job, and I remember our pastor, very industrious. He had another church in a neighboring town, and so I remember doing some work at that church, and it just seemed like when I was around him, I was taking notes
Good.
in my head and in my mind around my walk and his examples that he set, and I didn't realize that until I got older. And
Hmm.
when I proposed to my wife and shared that with him and invited him to my wedding back in 2005, and
Good.
he couldn't make it. But I think that's when, growing up, you see the adults as the authority figures
Right.
for whom you are to listen to.
Hmm.
Um, when there are healthy relationships there. And for me, I think, when I got older, I saw him in a different light, and I was just appreciative. I'm a connector, so I stay in contact with people
Yeah.
regardless. But I became, very appreciative, and I just remember reaching out, even as an adult, to let him know that appreciation. So, um, yeah, it was very important for me. So having been involved in church, and then, when you're saved at a young age, you still got to develop a walk. Like, there's
That's
no
right.
testimony, right?
Right.
It
That's
can't be
right.
your parents' testimony. So I had
Right.
to develop a testimony, and of course, you trip, you fall,
Yes,
you
sir.
don't understand,
Right.
and so you end up growing. But I think for me, when I went off to college, that's when it really cemented in my mind. One thing that I also remember about going off, so left New York and went to North Carolina, which more than 10 hours away. Before my mother left, uh, dropped me off with all my stuff, I remember her saying, "We're gonna find a church." And before
Good.
leaving New York, I had gone through the minute book to try to get a sense of what the churches were, and so
Yes. Yes. Yes.
um, but that first Sunday, the church that we visited was not a good fit, and
Sure.
I just remember, like, I had to find a church that was important.
Right.
Before going off to college, there were
Wow.
talks about finding a church,
Yeah.
and I try to have that same conversation with young people, or who aspire to go to college, or parents who have young people who are going to college. Like, it's important that your
That's
child
very
continues to
true.
grows
Yes.
outside of where you live, and that may even dictate which cities you're looking at to send your
That's right.
kids. Like,
That's right.
what's the trade-off? So anyway, I did end up finding a church, and joined and grew, and still stay in contact with the pastor there. So it was
Wow.
very important for me to in growing up, and I'm happy to even think about that. It was very important for me to still stay connected,
Mhm.
and to want to have the same experiences that I had growing up, around seeing young people on fire for God,
Yes.
serious about their walk. And then, of course, you go to college, and Christian means so many different things to different people.
Right.
And so being able to navigate and find friends who were equally serious, like that was another important piece, so that you don't stray away.
That's good. That's good. You said a minute book. I started laughing because that's how it was back in the
Yeah.
day. Before you left, they told you to look at the city and what you were going to and be connected with Like Faith Church. And so that's just how it was. So I want to talk about, uh, who were some of the uh, pastors that you can remember that you grew up listening to? I know we talked about this in phone conversation, but who were some of those preachers or mentors that you looked up to growing up that helped shape you be the man that you are today?
Yeah. So I think my response will be different in that my ministry is not preaching, and so
Right.
my growing up and listening to and being really impacted was not, like prolific. They are prolific, but it wasn't, a matter of me trying to model or get a
Right.
feel of what the art of preaching,
Yeah.
was to
Yeah.
look.
Yeah. Yeah.
But no, I've had so we and let's see if you know any of these folks.
Okay.
We um we lived 5 years in Tuskegee, Alabama. So
Okay.
Bishop Austin, who's a pillar, George Austin, a pillar in the faith. Um, and then after that, we moved to New York, as I mentioned. So Bishop Lacey, who passed as of late, and then went to North Carolina, and Bishop Marion Wright was there.
Okay. Yes.
Yeah,
Yes. Yes.
yeah. And so I'll never forget, like, going to church and just getting that southern. Now Rochester can be country southern to a
Okay.
certain degree where I grew up,
Okay.
but seeing that getting that southern gospel and southern feel was just totally different for me, and I appreciate those experiences.
What
Uh,
what made it so different?
well, I think, like, more importantly, the singing,
Okay.
some of the songs that we sing up north. I mean, we're going to sing some hymns, um, but some of the songs just in the South just seemed a little bit different. I don't know if they were storytelling or
Okay.
it just had a different presentation. And not
Right.
that it was bad or good, it was just different. And I appreciate having being in the music ministry, being able to not limit myself to
Right.
one
Right.
style. So Bishop Marion Wright, and then after that, we moved to Charlotte. We went to Bishop Robert's church. We were there. He passed shortly after we joined, and then after that, there for 5 years, and then we moved to Oklahoma City, and we attended Bishop Goldsmith's church for 4 years.
Okay.
But to answer
Wow.
your question directly, I did grow up listening to. I remember driving to school and listening to Joyce Myers
Good.
every day in high school. And I
Yes.
also remember listening to Bishop Jakes, and seeing Bishop Jakes when I was 17 in Niagara Falls. I was like, hey,
Wow.
this is different.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
and then when my wife and I would travel on Sundays when we couldn't be in church,
Hmm.
we traveled long distance. We would listen to Bishop Jakes on YouTube.
Yeah.
So now that we are in Dallas, we're members of Potter's House,
Good.
and
Good.
so
Good.
being able to really benefit from the preaching and teaching there.
Right. That's awesome. That's awesome. So we just have maybe two or three more questions for you. I think we kind of hit on what the gist of our interview was, but what are some of the challenges that you being a managing director in your position that you see teachers are facing nowadays when it comes to just education period? I know I've talked with a lot of teachers and times have changed. So what are some of the challenges that you think are arise nowadays?
Yeah, three things that come to mind are: it seems like this group coming out of COVID, emotionally dysregulation seems to really show up a lot.
Hmm.
And that causes, now I'm old school when it comes to really a lot of things, but specifically discipline and education. I'm like Here's what I said, do, get it done, keep it moving. I'm not gonna, not gonna argue with you. You go back and forth, I'll go back and forth with you, I'll issue a consequence with you. And so, I had to really, because while I'm a principal supervisor, I actually had to be a principal during the pandemic. So whenever, even right as of present, I have a principal who is on maternity leave. And so I have to step in and act in that capacity. So since I've been in Dallas, I've had to do that twice. And it started at spring break 2020 going into COVID. And so I was a sitting principal during COVID. And so I know what that experience looks like. But yeah, so just having to really practice, de-escalation strategies, and we have to do discipline differently. What used to work in the past does not work with this group. And so you have to.
And what do you mean by that?
So, for instance, even I'll think about, because I had to do this last week, when a kid is dysregulated, upset, angry, whatever, you vent to emotions. Normally, I will pretty much come on the scene a little bit assertive, a little bit aggressive, to try to, let like who's in authority,
Right.
who's in control, who's going to make a decision at the end.
Right.
So all you got to say.
Yeah.
I'm still going to say something. And so I had to. That's different. I had to lean in more as a counsel, through a counseling lens, or understand the why behind the behavior, as opposed to addressing the behavior first and not really caring too much about the why. Like, you curse the teacher out, we don't do that, and this is the consequence for that. Now, I'm trying to, like, what will make you think that was okay to do? And so I find myself asking different questions to understand the why, so I can help change the behavior, as opposed to, the old school of laying down the law. So dysregulation is high. And then coming out of COVID, we know that there are gaps in math performance across education, across all schools and all divisions. So we're struggling. There's a strategy specifically for my network and my schools, but many of us are struggling with how we address the math gaps and deficits. Because, when you look at the data, kids in high poverty schools probably miss 22. I think that the data says on average it's equivalent to 22 weeks of loss. And then kids in low poverty schools somewhere around 12 to 13 weeks. And so the disparity is there. So trying to help with the social emotional needs, and then fill in some of the academic gaps and deficits, begin to be some of the challenges. And then, just behaviors outside of dysregulation, bold behaviors, and a lot of things have shifted. I find myself spending a lot of time discussing what's happened on social media, understanding like what's happening in these DMs and group chats on Instagram and Snapchat, and image gone. And, so we spend a lot of time, because this age spent almost 2 years in the tech world, in that space. And so we spend a lot of time addressing that. And so, there are countless things that I'm sure that, collectively I could name, but those three come to mind.
I see. That's good. So I remember we had Blackberries and the teacher had an iPhone, but that was the era that we grew up in. We had the sidekicks. I don't know if you remember those in the classroom as far as cell phones, but with everybody having, it seems to me, the up-to-date cell phones, you have iPads now, you have tablets. How difficult is it to teach when people are on their phones? I mean, I thought we were bad because constantly we heard get off the phone, but not everybody had what we would call a smartphone. I mean, I don't remember hopping on Wi-Fi in the classroom until I got to college, and I graduated high school in 2011. So we're dating a little bit time back, but just to see, I couldn't go into school and hop on the Wi-Fi. We didn't have that luxury. But how I can't imagine being in the classroom right now and everybody's just everything is lit up. How difficult is it to teach in those situations?
Yeah, it's a huge distraction. And 2011, George, I could have been your teacher. You're saying that, and I'm counting like,
You're like, what?
okay. Talk about Blackberries and stuff. I didn't have that when I was in school.
You
But
didn't?
no, yeah, like it's a huge distraction. I know
Hmm.
many of my middle schools, because I'm over middle schools. I have 7 middle schools that I'm over, that span across the Metroplex. Many of my schools have opted to require or request kids to turn in their phones when they get in class. So you may see like a
Yeah.
phone baggie that kids can,
Yeah.
deposit their phone in when they walk in class. Do they all do it? No. I'm sure there's a decoy phone, one, here or there, but it is a distraction because there's this atmosphere of going viral. There's this
Yeah,
atmosphere
that's
of
so true.
recording everything. I remember I
Right.
remember at times when students would make teachers mad. I forget what the term was. And I was a principal when this happened. Kids would make teachers mad and purposely record it to post it. And then, we even see in this area that there are Instagram accounts created for schools and districts that are things like Dallas ISD Fight Club.
Wow.
So the idea is to, you know, become virtual, um, or viral, make things go viral. And, there's a lot of tension around that. And then, there's sexting, and there are things that are just happening that just really shouldn't be happening. So there's access that many of our kids are being given, and parents have got to be vigilant on what they allow, and then the expectations that they have of the schools. But and it makes it a challenge because as a teacher and as a former administrator, I would take a phone, and God forbid I'll lose it, because then it becomes another conversation of,
Right.
are
Right.
you going to reimburse me for my property?
Mm.
And so, yeah, times have changed. They truly have changed, and I think the technology has made it difficult. I've seen some teachers try to incorporate phones in the classroom where the kids are able to use calculators, digital calculators, or be able to like scan different Kahoot and different activities like that. Like, I get that when it's purposeful, but we definitely want kids to be responsible. At the middle school level, I don't think they're ready for that yet.
Sure.
At least not in September, but that's something that we have to work our way toward.
Yeah. Mm. Times are changing. Wow. My last question to you: where do you see education within the next few years? I mean, now I could be a little maybe behind times with this, but this is a two-part question. Are kids learning cursive? Are they learning some of the things that you and I learned, or have things just transpired to such a digital world that everything is on the computer? I'm just curious.
Yeah, I think, I mean, that's a loaded question. I think uh, public education, we have to change with the times.
I see.
And um, I think that what we are experiencing, because I look at 3 different cohorts, or these 3 different groups of educators before me when I'm in schools. I look at those who, like myself, were in education before COVID.
Hmm.
I look at those who entered during COVID,
I see.
and they have 2 different experiences, and sometimes reference points. And then I look at the group now that, I mean, while we still are technically in the pandemic, who have joined post COVID return. And so there are 3 different types of educators who um, share a common experience with the struggles and the rigors associated with being an educator, but they have different reference points. And so I think that what I would like to see, and I feel like it's going to happen, is that um, we will create opportunities for leadership, teacher leadership, school leadership, district leadership, where individuals or educators are anxious and willing to disrupt um, the system that we have, because there are things that just totally need to be changed about how we approach discipline, um, how we uh, how we view rigor and access a different curriculum, how we are more culturally responsive and and competent. And so there's so many things that needs to change. And I think what I see happening is there's a group of educators who generally do not want to just uphold the status quo. And I'm looking forward to seeing and definitely want to be a part of, of the reform that's to come. Um, and COVID, I think, positioned us to do things differently. Um, but we have to be willing to do that and be bold. Um, and so I think like that's the next step that I think you will see where we look at the traditional school day, the traditional experience. Even when you think around, I was listening to information today on Bitcoin. We are in a time where rules are wanting to be rewritten, and the way we did certain things are changing. So when
Right.
people travel, they no longer just do hotels as options; they do Airbnb or VRBO.
Right.
Like when you're traveling locally and you need to get from point A to point B, you don't only have the option of using a taxi or a cab. Like you can Uber or Lyft. Like there's some innovation that's happening, and so I
Right.
think there's opportunity for that to happen within education. I think when you look at the mid 90s, 96, 97, when charter schools came about, where the idea was, to really serve as these incubators for ideas. That was one. I think that was one part of the reform. But I'm anxious to see how things look differently. Whether they be opportunities to do some community collaboratives, where students can go to school for, specifically at the high school level, potentially go to school for half the day and get some deep learning and practical experience in a profession that they wish
Right.
to pursue. Whether that
Right.
be like a rotation of 4 different potential jobs or experiences. So the opportunities there, and this isn't old. Many are doing this now, but um, like there's just some opportunity to really change and disrupt the system, and I think like that's going to be the next step. We will see.
Excellent. Excellent. This has been good. This has been good and very informative. So I want to take the time out to say thank you to Mr. Stubbs for taking time out of his busy schedule. I know that he is a busy man. He's a great husband and a father, and I know he probably watched Dallas Cowboys get beat after church. So we're going to let him rest on that. But I'm going to give him an opportunity to say any final words of encouragement to those that will see this later, for those that are in education as well.
Yeah, so I know this has a lot of spiritual focus and influence, and so I would just want to emphasize that if you have access to young people,
Mm.
or if you're able to inform or influence programming specifically in your church, to make sure that there's an equal um, focus on salvation and education.
Good.
And I think that my experience is what I want my biological children, and then those in my family to have, and that is to have a good schooling,
Right.
and then also to have a good spiritual foundation, so that when it comes time to stand on your own 2 feet, you can be um, independent. You can be positioned to still grow spiritually and be connected to a ministry that you're able to give your gifts and talents to, and it's also able to pour into you. So I think education and religion, education and salvation are a dynamic combination. And if you're in that position to influence that, then I encourage you to be prayerful about how that influence looks.
Hmm.
I'm really disturbed when I look at the current generation who comes to church and they're on tablets and phones
Yes.
and
Yes.
anything else.
Right.
Uh, we were at a worship symposium, and a comment was made um, that our young people don't know how to worship. Um, and I'm
Mm.
and I'm in a mega church, and that was said.
Right. Right.
And so I begin to think, like, yeah, but when they come to church, we give them everything else. They're doing everything else
Right.
except listening to the word of God.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
and I think I've been guilty of that when my kids were like 1 or 2, just to keep them quiet. Like, here's my phone. So I think that's something to consider. So
That's awesome. That's awesome. Vincent said, Christ and education make the best combination. And that looks like it was quoted by Bishop Edward C. Roberts. That's right. You need both.
Yeah. He's a
And
good friend. He's a good
oh,
friend.
wonderful. Thank you, Vincent, for tuning in. And people all the time may say education is not for everybody, but if education is not your thing, get educated so deep in the Word of God that God will be able to elevate you and use you and wherever you go. Because we know that sometimes the fear of college, one may say, I don't have the money, various things.
Yeah.
But if you don't have it, get it so deep and educated in the Word of God that God will lift you up and use you. So I want to thank everybody for tuning in on tonight. Please, Mr. Stubbs, you're on Facebook and Twitter. But if not, stay connected via YouTube. I hope we can bring him back on to have him share some more of his wisdom and just to help us as we continue to build the kingdom of God for such a time as this. So all those that are watching, please subscribe again to our YouTube channel. We will come back, God willing, with another interview on this coming Saturday. We have Elder Lafayette Lane. He will be discussing the importance of good leadership. And then we have Pastor Patrick Brown out of North Carolina. He will be talking about God and therapy are both needed. So that should be a good discussion.
Mm-hmm.
All right. God bless you to everybody, and thank you.